is interested in this program. This is called the Rural Rapid Manufacturing Grant. And as was mentioned, it was introduced in this last legislative session. And we'd like to give you the details as we open up this opportunity. So the purpose of the grant, the Rural Rapid Manufacturing Grant, is to assist in the establishment of laboratories designed to train students and employees, build and improve equipment, and offer scholarships within the industry defined under the state code as rapid manufacturing. This is a $500,000 one-time appropriation for this coming fiscal year beginning July 1. So the question might be, what is rapid manufacturing? How do we define it? How is it defined in this legislation? Rapid manufacturing means a facility, laboratory, equipment, or process engaged in small batch, fast delivery manufacturing. Now, having done a little bit of research about what this means, small batch and rapid manufacturing, small batch typically is related to the textile industry, but it does not solely stay within that industry. It's just often recognized there. And small batch is defined as the production of the number of units, and it's generally, for example, in the textile industry, 500 units of a product or less or fewer. In some other industries, computer industries and so forth, small batch is often defined as 300 units or less. So this really lends itself to a smaller company who have customized orders in quantities less than your massive manufacturing facilities do, in the quantities of 300 to 500 in a single batch. What are the qualifying activities under the Rural Rapid Manufacturing Grant? Qualifying activities for this grant are, number one, construction or renovation of laboratories designed to train students and employees in clothing production, in engineering and computer graphics, in manufacturing systems, and in the textile sciences. Also, a qualifying activity would be the building and improvement of equipment to provide training and participation in rapid manufacturing. And finally, the training and scholarships for students and employees to participate in rapid manufacturing employment opportunities. Here are the qualifying organizations that may apply for this grant. They are institutions of higher education or nonprofit companies. Nonprofit companies can be somewhat broad, so we've defined them as 501c3s, C4, C5, and C6. That generally covers nonprofits, not just for charitable nonprofits, but for nonprofits such as educational institutions or the like. So any one of those types of nonprofit organizations may go after this grant. Also, as defined in legislation, the qualifying rural counties in the state of Utah for this grant are as follows: Beaver, Box Elder, Carbon, Daggett, Duchesne, Emory, Garfield, Grand, Iron, Juab, Kane, Millard, Morgan, Paiute, Rich, San Juan, San Pete, Sevier, Uinta, Wasatch, and Wayne. There are a handful of counties that have been excluded from this opportunity, and you can see the list here on the screen. They are Cache, Davis, Salt Lake, Summit, Tooele, Utah, Washington, and Weber. And so we are strictly concentrating on those smaller, typically smaller third-class counties to fourth, fifth, and sixth class counties. And the Rapid Manufacturing Grant will open up for applications on July 1. We intend to have the application cycle open for a period of 2 months, and then it'll close. We anticipate that we will get all the applications that we can manage to absorb that $500,000 appropriation. It's been determined that it's a appropriate length of time for the execution of a rapid manufacturing project would be 18 months. That would mean that from the time an application is approved, probably sometime in the month of September after applications have been reviewed, then from that time a contract would be entered into with the entity to create these laboratories, and that they would have 18 months to design and complete them and build them out in such a way that they are occupiable and functional with all their equipment in place. There will be components to the application. I'll introduce this a little bit more fully here shortly, but the standard information that we would need to enter into a contract with the state is listed here, but we're also asking for a proposal, the scope of work, a budget, a timeline, and deliverables. The applications will be scored. We anticipate that we'll get more than one. I've already had conversations with other entities that are expressing interest in this. So I would assume that we'll get a few applications going after that allocated amount of money. Therefore, we feel like it's appropriate to take in applications and score them. The reason for the scoring is we want to see the highest quality applications, but also there are certain considerations under this law, under this statute, that are written into the law, and they are these. Application priorities are given. Priorities will be given to applicants who will serve underprivileged or underserved communities, including communities with high unemployment and or low median incomes compared to the state averages. Priority would be given to where an applicant demonstrates comprehensive planning of a project and the cooperation of high quality partners, including the institution of higher education. And finally, that have a design to lead to the creation of high-paying employment positions in rural areas, suggesting that we produce out of these laboratories employees that will be able to be employed and paid at 125% of the average wages within those communities in which they're employed. So this is a priority list for scoring the applications, and this is statutory. So we will be looking very heavily at the priorities in scoring applications for this grant. I'd like to introduce to you also the instruction sheet. I'm going to pull this over. Hopefully, if you are watching on a screen, you can see this screen. We have not published this to the public yet. It will be published to you shortly thereafter. We will put it on the website, and it will be there available for instruction and preparation for your application, and leading up to the launch of the application, which will be July 1st. But I wanted to point out in this information and instruction sheet certain details. We've already introduced to you by the PowerPoint presentation some of this information right up front. the grant's purpose, the information that you that helps us define what rural rapid manufacturing is, what the qualifying activities are, and who qualifies. This instruction sheet will also explain the terms of the grant, how much money is available, the 18-month period for execution, and then it will get into the application process itself. And there are instructions here as to what the applying entity will need. Again, a repeat of the possible uses for this grant money and the priorities that will be given. Finally, it goes into the application scoring, and you'll see as I scroll down through this instruction sheet that there are components to the application, each component having a point value. So that will allow our application to be scored. It should be noted here, and you could probably read this on the page, that the score of 75 or greater will be considered for an award. In other words, a poor application, and I would probably suggest that a score of 75 is very, very accomplishable. But if we happen to have a poor application that just does not have the components and it does not have a good design, that may score lower than a 75, that application will not be accepted to move forward. Application components are going to be organizational information, very standard on any contract with the state, and then supporting documents that help us to understand who's participating, how much you anticipate the project will cost, letters of support from the communities in which you want to establish these laboratories. And then some, for a nonprofit applicant, there will be some additional information that basically is organizational information supportive of a nonprofit company rather than an institute of higher learning, for example. Components continuing here of the application. We will expect the entity to give us a history and basically a list of their qualifications or their background that tell us that they are uniquely qualified to establish these laboratories and to establish student training facility. And then we will look at a project proposal that will be on the application as well. That has a 20-point value. This is essentially an explanation of what the project will be and what your goals and benchmarks will be, who your stakeholders are, who your partners are, and what their defined roles are. Next would be a scope of work that has a 20-point value as well. This is essentially how, in the proposal, you've said what you're going to do. Scope of work is an explanation of how you're going to do it. And again, this is a repeat here of your qualifying activities. So we keep that in front of you as you make your application. You can address what the qualifying activities will be that you will be doing in order to establish these laboratories. Finally, we will ask for a budget, and this budget is expected to be in an itemized form. Of course, this will be projecting what you anticipate spending, and that is fine, but we would like to see what your anticipated budget will be, and we expect that you will also deliver. In fact, I think we have that as an uploaded proposed document, supporting document of a quotes and bids, for example, on the construction or the equipment or the installation or any labor that might be involved in the establishment of these facilities. So with quotes and bids and a budget, we will be able to see, or at least get a view into your plan, and that the plan is executable against a quantity of money that you ask for in the grant. Finally, we expect to see a timeline. There's a sample timeline here, basically saying we anticipate reaching this benchmark or this goal at this time over the course of that 18 months that you have to execute the full project. Finally, in the application process, we'll ask you to give us a deliverables and outcomes section, which is essentially a synopsis or a summary of the proposal and the scope of work, the budget, the timeline in written form that we can put into the contract, that the compliance department is going to be able to read and see clearly that at the end of your project and when you ask for reimbursement, that the project is actually completed as you designed it. That will be, you can see points again that will be scored on each one of these items or elements of the application. That will hopefully derive a score to the applicant of not less than 75, and then put them into consideration for the grant. Finally, now this is not a part of the application process, but we have here at the end of the information and instruction sheet what will be required of the awardee in order to get reimbursement. We've designed into this grant something slightly different than what we've done with other grants in our department, where in the past, well, with all of our grants, everything is post-performance. In other words, everything has to be, the projects in those, under those grants have to be completed 100% and paid for 100% before you can ask for reimbursement. In this case, under this grant, we will give partial reimbursement through the course of, oh, I've got a mistake there, it says 12 months, it'll be 18-month term of the contract, not to exceed 50% of the expenses incurred during the development of the project. Essentially what that means is that you will be able to submit an itemized sheet with proof of payment, partial payment, or of some of the project as it has been completed to that point, and you may be reimbursed up to 50% of the overall funds. And then at the finish and proof of finish of your project completion, then you can request the remaining 50% that is outstanding for your project. And there will be instructions here at the bottom, as you can see, bulleted, pointed out that what will be required of you in order to make a reimbursement request. So this information and instruction page will be available as soon as we can get it up and ready onto the website. Again, that will be just prior to July 1, which will be the launch of the application. I also wanted to pull this over to my screen here so that you can see that there will be a link to the application. The application is already in place, although it is not live for you to enter yet. And we will make sure that you have a link provided from our website. We'll also send out an additional email to our audience and those who may be interested with a link just prior to the opening of the application period. The application, as you can see here on the screen, has much of the same information and explanation as the information in the instruction sheet and what has been introduced to you via the PowerPoint this morning. And as you check the boxes, you will be able to move through the course of the application. On this page, you ought to identify who you are. That will determine what other informational and uploading fields will be required of you. For example, if I were to hit this nonprofit button, I'm a nonprofit applicant. This will open up to all of the information that I will be required to upload and insert in order to go to the next page. And the next page will draw me into the scope of work proposal, the budget and the timeline, and the deliverables page. We'll have that completed and linked up for you within the next couple of weeks. Nan, I am finished with my presentation, and I would be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, James. That was great. We did get a question here, but I believe you have answered it essentially. The first question is, can you tell me how soon this info will be available online? I'm hoping that we can get this out on the website mid next week. And James, do you think there's any possibility of anything sooner, or do you think next week is going to work?
I think that would be fine. What we could do, I think that would be ideal, anticipating that we would have everything linked up and ready to go by then on the website. That'd be excellent. I think what we might be able to do is at least produce the instructions sheet in a PDF form that may be mailed or emailed out to everyone even as early as today. We could produce that today. But otherwise, the reference back to the linking will have to occur within the next week, yes.
Thank you. We've got another question. Was the $500,000 funding for this grant included in GoEd's budget, or was this created by the legislature?
Thanks for the question. This was created by the legislature with an appropriation of $500,000. So we have been charged as the entity that administers the program. So GoEd Rural Development is organizing this, and we will administer it from here. But it was an appropriation by the legislature.
And I believe this was a one-time appropriation, James. Is that your understanding?
That's correct. It's one time. This is the only time that this grant will be offered so far, unless they decide to expand it in the next legislative session. We can anticipate that this might be a one-time shot. $500,000, so that's the pool of funds. And if you've got a great project that lends itself to this type of activity and this type of educational opportunity, this is the time to seize it.
Great. Let me put the call out to the group. Any more questions for James? Looks like you've answered all of them, James. And again, you did a great job. So please note, everyone, that we will do our best to get all of this information up on the website and also via email blast. Thank you all for participating. If you do have additional questions, you're always free to reach out to us. James Dixon is always available by email, or myself, Nan Anderson. Okay, sorry, a last minute question just came in. Where can I add in emails for the blast? Just send me your email. My address is nanderson, Nanderson, at utah.gov. With that, thank you all very much for participating, and have a great day.